Well, let's introduce ourselves first and foremost. I'll go first. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jacob Noonan. I'm the housing program manager here with SCAG, and I'm leading the effort to stand up our housing-focused grant programs in the Regional Early Action Planning Grants Program, aka the REAP 2.0 Planning Grants Program that we'll be rolling out this year. And joining me today, I'll kick it over first to Jessica and then Zach. So I'll kick it over to Jessica to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jessica Reyes-Juarez. I'm an associate regional planner at SCAG. I work with Jacob and Zach on this housing grant program elements of REAP 2.0. And yeah, we're looking forward to chatting with you today. Zach?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Zach Gardea, Associate Regional Planner here at SCAG, part of this small but mighty team that's ramping up these housing programs in REAP 2. So thanks for joining us.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again. And so today, as you in the invitation, we will be reviewing our draft Programs to Accelerate Transformative Housing, or PATH program application. This is a template application that we are going to be using for the 3 funding areas within PATH. We'll have a little bit of an overview. First, we'll start with REAP 2.0 and an overview of the REAP 2.0 program, just so that we're all on the same page. And then we'll also review the PATH program. Now, that was adopted by the Regional Council on November 3rd. It is still pending approval by the state, but those guidelines are available. They're on our website. We'll provide that website in the presentation. So we'll review that, and then we'll jump into the application timelines, the program milestones, just to give all of us a sense of where we are in the process, what we can expect now, what we can expect in the near term, and then when we can expect the calls to be released. And then we'll jump into the application sections and really start to review at a high level, really, the application and the sections in the application itself. We're hoping that you'll also have a chance to download the application and review it and provide us with some written comments by our deadlines or by the Regional Council meeting. And then we also want to highlight that, technical assistance is available. We're here to support and help folks with questions and to help fill out this application so that folks are able to submit successful applications for our call processes. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Zach, who's going to lead us through the background and bring us up to through items 1 through 3 in the agenda. Take it away, Zach.
Thanks, Jacob. Once again, thank you, everyone, for joining our workshop today. Hopefully, the information we provide you is helpful and furthers your interest in our PATH program. So I'll start off with a brief overview of SCAG's REAP 2.0 program framework, which was adopted by our Regional Council in June of 2022. And that has really provided the guidance for developing each of the 3 programmatic funding areas in SCAG's full REAP 2.0 application. On the left side of this slide, are the important aspects of the state REAP 2.0 program. SCAG's regional formula share is about $246 million, and this is out of the $600 million that's available statewide. And these funds must be encumbered by June of 24 and fully expended by June of 2026. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see the principal objectives of REAP 2.0, and that's really leading to transformative planning and implementation activities that accelerate infill development, that facilitates housing supply choice and affordability, activities that affirmatively further fair housing, and activities that reduce VMT. On the right-hand side are SCAG's 3 programmatic funding areas. These are the early action initiatives, the transportation partnership program, and the PATH program, which is what we're here to discuss today. So drilling down further into the PATH program, PATH has 3 funding areas. These are the Notice of Funds Available, or NOFA, for lasting affordability, the Regional Utility Supporting Housing, or RUSH pilot program, and the Housing Infill on Public and Private Lands, or HIP pilot program. You can tell that SCAG here, we do love our acronyms. The NOFA will provide $45 million for innovative finance strategies for affordable housing, establishing permanent funding sources, and supporting housing and land trusts. The RUSH program will make about $35 million available to identify and implement means for scaling utility infrastructure to meet the needs for housing across the SCAG region. And finally, the HIP pilot program will make a little more than $8.8 million available to provide technical assistance to public and private landowners who wish to explore developing their available lands with an affordable housing component, and also provide technical assistance to cities and counties interested in increasing capacity to achieve housing along corridors and in area-wide infill locations. So now let's talk about the timelines for each of these funding areas. Once the regional council has approved our application and authorized release of the calls, and when the state has approved SCAG's full funding application, each of the PATH funding areas will be released separately. In general, each call will have a 45-day response period. Currently, we're anticipating being able to release the NOFA and HIP pilot program in April. And so those calls could close in May. Staff will then review responses for completeness in late May and early June. Following this, the selection panel will review and score each complete response, and final scores will be released in mid-summer, followed by conditional award letters that we are aiming to be delivered within 60 days of the close of each call. Finally, those conditional award letters will then be subject to approval from the regional council, which we're targeting to occur in September. A quick note about RUSH. RUSH is expected to be released later in spring, following the industry forum. So now let's look at a brief update on the PATH milestones to date. So at the end of January, we released the draft PATH application for public comment. SCAG staff then begun visiting the sub-regional planning director monthly meetings in February to share the application and how to submit comments, and we're still underway with those meetings. Today, we are here attending this virtual listening session to receive your feedback on the application template. And written comments that we received by 5 p.m. on February 13th will be included in the regional council item in March. Interested members of the public will still be able to provide comments up to and during the March 2nd regional council meeting, but we just won't be able to incorporate those comments into the agenda item since that packet will have already been created. But again, we will address any comments received at the regional council meeting in March. The remaining milestones include the open call periods, regional council's consideration of the funding awards in September, and the encumbrance and expenditure dates for the REAP 2.0 funds. So now let's dig into the contents of the application, starting off with the submittal checklist. The draft application that's posted on SCAG's REAP 2021 webpage is a draft version of what will ultimately become the application for each PATH funding area. The application includes a submittal checklist with 5 sections and 4 attachments. To be considered a complete response to the call, the application must be signed by an authorized representative, be completely filled out, and be accompanied by all required attachments. And we'll get into each of those sections in this presentation. So starting off with section 1, that's going to be the signature and terms and conditions page. To sign and certify the application, a person must be duly authorized to sign for the organization. So that can be a city manager, general manager, executive director, planning director, or equivalent. By signing, you confirm that all information provided is true and correct, and that you, as the applicant, will adhere to the PATH program guidelines, and that the applicant will provide a local resolution by the entity's governing board authorizing execution of a funding agreement. But that requirement won't come until after award of funds. Section 2 of the application is the minimum eligibility requirements. There are 2 principal requirements that establish eligibility for these funds. The first being applicant eligibility. In that green table, you can find a summary of the various applicants eligible under each funding area, but you can also find a more exhaustive list in the PATH program guidelines. And secondly, the project must be entirely located within infill areas. So a map of your project area will be required as an attachment, and it must fall within the definition of what constitutes infill for the purposes of these funds. It's important to note that SCAG has developed in partnership with local stakeholders an alternative definition from what is in the state guidelines, and that alternative definition is currently under review with the state, so you're not going to find that posted on the application that's up currently on our webpage. But once we finalize that, we'll be sure to add that to the final version of the application. So section 3, moving on here, is the general contact and project information. So here we'll ask for the standard contact info, the name of the person submitting the application, their title, email, phone number, as well as the agency or organization name. Regarding project information, we'll ask for the name and location of your project, and a description of how your project aligns with the specific funding area, because again, each funding area has its own objective. And then finally here, we'll also be asking for estimated project costs, how much funding you're requesting, and if there are any local matches to consider. So I think with that, I will turn it back over to Jacob to get into the evaluation criteria. Jacob.
Thanks, Zach. So first, I just posted in the chat a link directly to the draft application. So for those who want to drop into that and follow along with us, feel free to do that. You can use this link also to access the document later. We'd really like to, we're very interested in hearing your feedback, your thoughts on the application, on the this evaluation criteria and the approach we're using. Again, the evaluation criteria itself, and as you see in the slide here, the boxes that are shaded and are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, those have been approved by the regional council. However, How we're structuring the evaluation criteria and the selection process is part of why we're reaching out to you today to hear your thoughts and feedback on how workable this is for you. We've designed this so that it meets the state's requirements. So in summary and at a high level, the application will include this, essentially this chart. The selection process will include a review for completeness. Staff will do that, and then all complete responses to each call will be reviewed by a selection panel that will consist of subject matter experts and SCAG and unrelated SCAG staff. The selection panel will use a 5-point scale to evaluate responses in each of the areas. Important to note, as you see that second bullet in, your responses to questions 1 and 2 must score points in order to be considered. And the reason for this is that those 2 questions leading to transformative significant beneficial impact and equitable targeted outreach are both threshold criteria from the state REAP 2.0 program from the statute. So you do need to place scoring within that. We will have technical assistance available. We're available now. We're happy to meet with you and with staff to discuss concept projects, concept applications. Once we open a call, we will have a workshop on the program application, and we will be providing weekly office hours. And then again, there is an intent that we're able to meet with anyone who's interested in reaching out and has questions. We do have to realize that our staff time, it could be limited. There's 3 of us, but we are going to make every effort to meet with anyone who's interested in discussing their applications while the call is open. Once the call closes, we cannot receive any additional information after that point. So I'm going to just gently go through each of these different areas. We'll start with the first here. You can see that this first criteria leading to a transformative significant beneficial impact, it's worth a sizable amount of the scoring, 31.25% of scoring. That's 25 points possible, with the bulk of those points focused on accelerating infill development that facilitates housing supply, choice, and affordability. And then 5 points each for affirmatively furthering fair housing and reducing vehicle miles traveled. Again, these address the core of the requirements for the REAP 2 funding. This is the purpose. If you look back in the program objectives, these questions are directly pulled from the program objectives itself. And so that first 1.1, you will have 5 points each for facilitating housing supply, facilitating housing choice, and affordability, and then 5 points for the other 2 criteria on the slide. We will happy to answer any questions on this at the end of the presentation. And again, if questions are coming up, feel free to post those in the chat. Next, criterion 2 asks for equitable targeted outreach, and how equitable target outreach is going to be included in the project as the project's developed and moves forward. So focusing on 2 different areas, priority populations, engagement, how you propose to work with priority populations. We do have that as a list. It's included within the application. And then how you also are proposing to be inclusive, diverse, and equitable in your engagement strategies in total in the project. Again, staff are available to answer questions and to meet with you to discuss your project and to identify ways if you'd like to talk with us about options for addressing this and meeting these requirements. So this area, again, you do need to score within it. We do anticipate that this will be a competitive area, and so you'll want to make sure that your application is able to hit as high a point score as possible within this question. The third criteria focuses on how the local environment is supportive, leading to the success of the project. So again, you'll notice this is a high scoring area, 25 points possible in this area. It's focused mainly in the ability to complete the project and the cost effectiveness in the project. So we are asking you in the application to explain how you're justifying the cost measures and the effectiveness of the approach that you're using, and then the evaluation of your ability, the ability for the applicant to complete the project, along with a discussion of what are some local policy commitments that are already in place, establishing, for instance, if the project is looking at increasing the scale and capacity to build housing along corridors, what other policy commitments has the city taken to date in that direction and towards that means of achieving housing? And then what types of partnerships is the organization, the entity involved in? What types of financial matches perhaps are in the project? Again, there's no requirement for a local match, but certainly if the project includes other financial matches, that's something to discuss and share. Now, we are offering, providing a priority for projects that are supporting disadvantaged communities. This includes priority populations, and then ways of addressing historic and current inequities and creating benefits for priority populations. So I think an important note is that the area where the project is focused, the infill area where you're focusing the project, doesn't necessarily need to be an area that is classified as disadvantaged or historically underserved, but the project needs to be focused for this criteria to score points, needs to be focused on providing support, be it, for instance, through creating new affordable housing opportunities that are going to be through following fair housing practices available to and supportive of, offering alternatives for people in disadvantaged communities and historically underserved communities to find other housing in higher income areas. Just one example, but we're happy to talk with anyone through any questions and ideas with anyone who's interested in learning more or who would like to just pitch some ideas on how a project could be designed to meet this criteria. Our last criteria is really focused on making sure that we're able to fund projects through the entire Southern California region, and that we're looking at and advancing projects that are really exploring some new approaches for scaling housing supply that can be adapted or applied in other areas, and also advancing our regional diversity through achieving our Connect SoCal plan. So again, this area worth 10 points or 12.5% of the total score. So again, to look at this, the evaluation criteria in total, there's a total of 80 points possible, with the emphasis, as I alluded to in the presentation, on these criterion 1, criterion 3. So the how you're meeting the threshold criteria, the ability to complete the project and the cost effectiveness. And then that we're offering priorities for projects that are supporting disadvantaged communities and leading to regional change. Now, in the application, in addition to the sections, the evaluation criteria, there are some attachments that you will fill out. We're asking you to fill these out as completely as possible. They will be part of the package that the selection panel reviews and evaluates in relation to how they align with the evaluation criteria. For instance, the budget and schedules and the scope and deliverables will dovetail into the success of the project and the ability and the cost effectiveness. We do have an Excel workbook template that we're developing, so we will be able to offer that as the tool that you will use to fill these out as complete as possible. We will be asking you for project area maps as well that you will use our SCAG mapping tool to develop, and then you'll be able to save those down and attach those to your complete application. So I think that we kind of run through each of these applications. I'll be very brief on it. This one I'm going to spend a little more time on, just to note that the state is requiring some measurable outcomes and metrics. And for your baseline, for the targeted projected outcomes, we're working internally to develop a list of different options for those metrics, so that we can provide additional background and guidance on what you should be expecting to be collecting for your baselines and during the project cycle to your complete report in 2026. So more to come on this specific outcome and metrics as we move towards the calls. I think the additional ones, we'll just flip through these briefly, but just to give you a picture, it's a Excel-based budget and schedule, scope and deliverables, and then of course the project maps will have instructions included within the application with a link to our mapping tool and how to pull those maps down and save them for submitting with your application package. I think at this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jessica Reyes Juarez. She has a couple of slides on technical assistance and other programs, and then we'll be able to open it up for your questions.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Yes. So for our various programs that are coming out of REAP 2.0 for the various call for projects, SCAG is going to be providing technical assistance. This will be in the form of office hours where you can speak to the program leads of that call for project, individual application workshops that will be virtual, and then data tools to support applicants as they go through the process. So we'll be providing more information on that for program-wide REAP 2.0 technical assistance on the website. For the PATH program in particular, which includes the NOFA, the HIP, and RUSH, our team here, Jacob, Zach, and myself, we're available now if you want to start discussing conceptual project proposals. Please feel free to reach out to Jacob. We can set up a time to talk. Once the calls open up in early April, we'll host an application workshop similar to this to review the final applications. We'll have one for HIP and one for NOFA, and we'll also have regular weekly office hours. And you'll be able to sign up for those office hours on our REAP 2021 website to lock in a time slot with us. And then the website will also have resources where we'll post some regular Q&A with some common questions that we're receiving so that everybody has the same information when we're responding to clarifying items. And as we mentioned, we're here to get some feedback to help finalize this draft application into a final application. So if you want to take time to review the draft application and provide some written comments, we ask that you do so by February 13th at 5 p.m. You can send those to Jacob. This is just so we have time to incorporate your comments to our March 2nd Regional Council agenda item. Of course, you'll still be able to provide any comments up until March 2nd. There's no problem there. We'll just be addressing those verbally at the meeting. And before we jump into our Q&A, I did want to provide you with some resources and updates on some of our REAP programs. So firstly, to support those applying to the call for projects coming out of REAP 2.0, SCAG is working on developing a series of data tools to evaluate your project application. And this tool could also be used to support in analyzing some of those metrics and outcomes. We're working through this right now, so we don't have that much information to share, but to give you a big picture, the big data platform provides data on congestion and projected congestion. It can support analyzing vehicle miles traveled. There's some historic and real-time traffic volume data in there, advanced transportation data if you're looking for trip origin, travel mode, vehicle speed, safety information. And this is to be used for as you're developing your REAP application or in the reporting back, but some examples could be baseline traffic conditions in development areas, or if you're looking to estimate future transportation outcomes from a housing development. And the second tool we have is the performance dashboard. And this will help you easily identify infill opportunities, and those connect SoCal priority growth areas. It'll have some disadvantaged community metrics. So the goal is to simplify equity planning with this performance dashboard. Once we're ready to roll this out, we'll be providing some training sessions. And the contact for that at SCAG is Scott Johnson, and his email is there, johnson@scag.ca.gov. And if you have any questions on this as well, you can feel free to throw them in the chat. And we also wanted to let you know that our other call being funded by REAP, which is the Sustainable Communities Program call for application, it will also be released in early spring. This call is focused on civic engagement, equity, and environmental justice. There are $5 million allocated for this competitive grant. Cities and counties in the SCAG region are eligible to apply. And some sample eligible uses include housing and land use strategies and multimodal communities. So if you're interested in learning more about this call, there is more information on the program on the same SCAG REAP 2021 webpage, or you could also reach out to the program lead, which is Hannah Brunell, and her email address is there as well. So at this time, we'd like to take a moment to answer any questions you have. So as Jacob mentioned, you could either raise your hand or put your question in the chat. And if you need some inspiration, we love to hear back on some of the following elements. This would be very helpful for us, such as like, is the submittal checklist clear? Does the application seem approachable? Are there any issues with timings? Do you see potential pinch points? Even on, if you're thinking about data, what type of data resources could be helpful for you in developing your application? So let's see, I have the participant list here handy. Marie, I will go ahead and ask you to unmute.
While Marie unmutes, I've been posting some links in the chat, so feel free to have a look there. I posted the program application, the guidelines, and the link to our REAP 2021 page. Take it away, Marie.
Hi, everyone. Marie Sullivan, Metro. I was just wondering, to the extent that you are trying to put together a fund that, for affordable housing that might be more regional in nature, how would you want to reflect a program like that in the mapping exercise?
You would want to just demonstrate your region, the area. You will have to, it's an important note for those who are thinking about doing this type of a project, that these funds are only for infill sites. So even though you would be looking at applying this fund across the larger region, you would still need to demonstrate that the funds would be only focused in the infill areas. And then that type of a project will, you would want to apply to our NOFA for lasting affordability for the fund, which is set up and focused on finance strategies like that. It's great.
And then we have a question in the chat. Can you share the differences we might see between SCAG's infill definition and the state's?
We've been working with folks from across the region, and in particular in more rural suburban areas, to make sure that the definition does not preclude their applications. So the definition that we would have is going to be more flexible than a state definition. That being said, you should be aware that the state definition has a lot of flexibility within it. And so we have based a definition on what we were hearing and the feedback that we were receiving from a number of focus groups that we held, and in particular, making sure that folks from tribal nations, from rural areas, from suburban areas were included in the conversation and had the opportunity to review the state's definition and provide some feedback and thoughts on how the definition could be adjusted to better meet the needs. As I said, I don't think we have that available online, although I do believe that we have the infill definition in our guidelines, if not in our application. So maybe we can post it in the chat for folks while we're on this info session.
I don't think it's in the guidelines. I think the state's definition's in the guidelines. But I think it's as soon as we hear back from the state on the go ahead, we'll be able to share it.
Okay, so we have
Mhm.
put the state definition in the guidelines itself. Okay, so that's a starter point, for I know that it looks like Caesar's, thank you for the question, is asking where the alternative definition is. We don't have that available right now. However, for perspective, we can share the state definition, and just being aware that the SCAG, the proposed definition that we're working with the state on, is more flexible than that.
I'll go ahead and ask Melanie to unmute, and then we'll work through the other questions in the chat.
Yes, thank you. My question, I just wanted to confirm, in the IE in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, we have multiple, affordable developers, or the city is working, has an infill approach, but working with different, affordable developers, nonprofits. Would they be allowed to submit multiple applications in partnership with different organizations? And so I just wanted to get clarification or confirmation that cities or counties can do so.
Cities well, have a look at the eligibility criteria.
Yeah.
So cities and counties are eligible in the different areas, certainly within the Housing Infill and Public-Private Lands, or HIP, program. They are eligible if they are in control of land. Certainly they're eligible as under a regulatory land use. Cities and counties could also be eligible in the NOFA if they manage a trust that's set up for affordable housing. A housing developer is not eligible for REAP 2 funds, but a housing trust fund, anyone who's managing a trust. So if you have someone who's just who is in an organization that's focused on developing housing, that organization in and of itself wouldn't be eligible unless they were in control of large areas of land, or if they had a trust that they were managing for affordable housing.
Okay.
Right. Does that answer your question, Melanie?
I think there.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I can follow up with you later too.
I think there was
yeah.
It seemed like you may have had another part of that question that I didn't answer, and that's around the partnerships. Certainly partnerships, we encourage them. I think that that's great. We have, in fact, that part of the criterion is partnerships. The major applicant on the that's submitting the response should meet the criteria that's in the funding. Certainly they could bring in any number of partners. So for instance, you could have a housing trust or a city that wants to partner with a housing developer. In that case, the applicant would be that eligible entity. And then to bolster that application, they certainly could have their partnership team presented in the application as well, which could include the housing developers.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So we have another question in the chat. If we are applying to fund an EIFD feasibility study, what type of outcomes would you want to see other than the outcome that an EIFD is feasible for the study areas?
The REAP 2.0 funding is focused on implementation and on actionable deliverables. So to the extent that the EIFD comes back as feasible, that's wonderful. For the funding, the state's expectation, I believe, would be that then the city or the county takes action to establish the EIFD.
Great. And then another question is, well, can we provide links to the data tools that will help evaluate certain thresholds in the application? I think all of these will be included in the final application once it's posted. We're still working through those resources. Is that right, Jacob?
I'm sorry, I was looking for the infill definition to post that.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was just someone asked if we could provide all the data tools and the resources but I was saying that we're compiling all that information right now. So once the application is released, you'll have links to all of that.
Yeah, and we are planning to roll that out, and we'll include that as part of the application workshop, and then that'll be on the website at the beginning of the call.
Yes. I think Jacob is working on seeing if there's something in regards to the infill definition that we can share. Are there any other questions from anybody? And feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, so I was able to, I pulled the state's definition and dropped that in the chat. That is in our program guidelines on page 14. I'll drop a link to the guidelines again in the chat as well. We definitely would love to hear thoughts if folks want to have questions about the infill definition or has any additional thoughts. So we have a couple of hands raised still. Melanie, did you still have your hand up, or did you have a new question? Okay, hands down. So I see Alexander Russell. Hello.
Yeah, and I apologize if this has been covered. How do you determine, so there's different pots, how do you determine how much your particular request would yield? Like, how do you determine how much money you could apply for?
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't set any threshold limits, so there's no minimum and no maximum for the requests. We did that because we weren't sure what types of requests or interests we would have in these 3 different funding areas, and we didn't want to prevent any good projects just simply on a technicality of how much funding needed to be submitted. So it's open-ended.
Great. A couple other questions came in through the chat. So how would innovative approaches to scale housing supply be measured?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the state in their guidance, they did provide us with an attachment 4 that lists out a number of different options. Most of them are focused around unit counts, housing counts, but we know that it takes longer than 2 years to develop housing. So we're working to develop a set of measures that would be based on capacity and potential for achieving housing. And we need to work with the state. We have not proposed these to the state yet, but we're going to work with them to see if we can get some agreement on a suite of measures that we can then provide out to the region, so that you don't have to develop your own, but that you would be able to pull from the list of options that we're able to provide.
Great. And then Cesar did have some comments also on infill in regards to the alternative definition, and if there's any working draft that we can share. I think Cesar, can we follow up with you? We did do, as part of our public outreach in the program development, we did review the infill definition to get comments. So the working draft is based on the feedback we did receive. I'm not sure there's a clean cut definition that's very shareable, because it's a little bit in flux and integrated into our application with the state. But I have a tag here to follow up with you if that's okay. The other questions we have, one is industry form reference under Rush. We do anticipate to have this in spring. We're hoping to release a date very soon. This will be ideally sometime perhaps towards the end of April, but it could push to May.
Don't hate on me.
Will the data tools be granular enough to analyze parcel specific equity requirements? So for anything regarding the data tools, I believe Scott Johnson, he added his email to the chat here. Feel free to reach out to him directly. He'll be able to go into the details of that with you.
And hi, this is Scott. I can respond to that
great.
briefly. I'm not sure the equity tools will be to the parcel level. I would suspect it's census tract, but I can get more information about that. And then the big data tool, that would be, up to the level of like turning movement counts and different mode choice. So that would be very granular on the big data. But the equity, I don't believe that would be to the exact, development parcel level. But I can look into that and they can get back to you with that more information on that. And my email is was mentioned is in the chat.
Great. And then another question we have is if nonprofits can apply for RUSH, understanding that developers of large area of land are eligible, and what do we consider sizable in terms of housing units? Do you want to take that one on, or do you want me to take that one on?
You can go ahead and take that one on. I actually jumped in. I was looking for that alternative infill definition.
Got
Just
it, got
post
it.
in the chat. It's in our full application, just not readily available.
Yeah. So the thing to consider with RUSH is that if we break down the name, right, regional utility supporting housing. So this is going to go beyond any type of utility infrastructure capital improvement investments or point of connections. This is looking to create something that's sizable across the region or sub-region that can really help implement a new process to think about how we plan for and build for infrastructure utilities. So the industry, the utilities industry forum that will be convening, the idea is that we can bring experts from across the nation and also locally to think collaboratively and to think of solutions that can help clear up some of the bottlenecks that we have in terms of utilities and housing development. So it may not go down to the level of a nonprofit in that sense, but if you're interested in the forum, I'll put my name in the chat as well. You can feel free to reach out to me and I can give you more information on that. And I see we have a hand raised, so go ahead and ask
This
you to
is
unmute.
Jose Gardia. Hello,
Hi,
sir.
Jacob. Hi, Jacob. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Zach. So following up, Jacob, on the question in regards to the funding request, you say it's open-ended, but does that mean that we sort of need to take a guess on what we think the cost will be, or do you think we should make a more informed decision on what that amount would be?
Definitely make an informed decision on what you think your costs are going to be, because part of the criteria is going to be evaluating your cost effectiveness and your ability to complete the project. And we're encouraging folks as they're filling out the budget and the scope to really be mindful, be thoughtful about how you're designing your budget so that it meets those objectives of cost effectiveness, and that you are, not only are you coming in at the best price, but you're also putting enough money into the project that will meet the project needs and requirements. It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, so just, Jacob, just to follow up to that. So that means then that in my case, if we're going to be retaining a consultant for a feasibility study, that means that I would need to be in contact with potential consultants to have a better sense of what that cost would be, right? Or is there another way of doing that?
I could see that that's one feasible way. If you're able, if consultants are able to give you a ballpark estimate on the costs of the project, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We have another great question in the chat. If an application scores excellent, it meets all the deadlines, all the evaluation criteria, and we're oversubscribed for funding, how are we going to be addressing that? Are we going to ask applicants to lower funding award, or rather than applied versus denied funding? So I guess there are various ways that we're trying to address this, but one is we are considering the regional aspects of distributing the funds across the region. So we'll be evaluating projects against similar place types. And do you want to talk a little bit about the oversubscribed funding, Jacob?
We do have the ability to shift funds if we are oversubscribed in one area and undersubscribed in another. We do have the ability to shift funds around within both within PATH and within the programs within REAP 2.0 in total. So we could look at doing that if we had more interest, for instance, in one of the PATH areas, a little less interest in another. We could look at shifting funds.
Right. And then it's also important, I guess this is getting at your question too, Adam. We're looking to fund projects completely. Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're looking to provide partial funding.
That's correct. Yeah, we did think about that. That was part of what we contemplated. Our interest would be in assuring that the project is able to be completed. So, you know, in that hypothetical where we didn't have enough funding, that project, we wouldn't be able to okay a partially funded project. There, in the hypothetical, other funding would have to come in so that it's a whole project.
Right.
I see we have another question around cost effectiveness, and this is based within the project that in one of the questions within the application asks for an explanation on a narrative on the cost-effective measures that the applicant is taking to assure that the most cost-effective approach is being incorporated into the application itself and into the project. And then also in the question, I noted that it was, the question was, is cost effectiveness assessed against other affordable housing projects? I think it's important for us to note on the call here that we're not funding SCAG in this funding in these grant applications we're not directly funding affordable housing projects. These funds are for programs, and those programs could be a funding model that an entity uses to put money into an affordable housing project, but we're not able to use these funds directly in affordable housing projects itself. So we're looking for entities that are the eligible entities in this category would be entities that manage a trust that they're using, you know, a fund of money that they're using to support affordable housing projects by issuing loans or grants. That's not part of our call, but that would be the funding structures that are in place, such as, for example, if you have a regional or a local housing trust, a city has a housing trust. There's other organizations that have established a trust that's specifically used for affordable housing projects. That entity would be eligible to apply if the use of the funds is innovative. It's a new approach to establishing affordable housing. They would be able to apply if they were awarded funds. That funding would then be eligible to be used in an affordable housing project. But I just want to make sure and be clear that these funds in the REAP 2 dollars wouldn't be able to be directly used from SCAG into an affordable housing project.
Yes, if you have any ideas in mind that you're thinking about for a project, just shoot Jacob an email and we can do just like a quick gut check, and if you would like, we can set up one-on-one time. Okay, I know we have 2 minutes left here. Any final questions?
I do want to post my email in the chat again and just encourage anyone, folks, if you have questions, reach out. We're happy to set up a meeting. Would love to chat with anyone who's interested. And then again, please, if you have the time, pull down our draft application, have a look at that. We can accept comments to be included in the staff report until the 13th. We'll certainly be including any comments, thoughts after that as well. But the 13th is just in order to fit it into the staff report to meet our deadlines for the agenda item. So, and thank you, Jessica. Just posted a link to our REAP 2021 page. Bookmark this page. In fact, even on that page, there's a link that you can follow to sign up for updates on housing from SCAG. If you haven't already signed up for housing updates, please do that. we will be pushing information out through a number of different ways. One of those ways is through our e-blasts that we use off of that list that's generated. So take a moment, jump over to REAP 2021, sign up for our housing updates, and then check back frequently for updates on information. And as the program evolves, we're going to be dropping all of our information materials here on at scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021.
Thank you all. We'll be posting this recording on the website over the next couple of days if you'd like to check back and share with any of your colleagues.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great afternoon and feel free to reach out. We want to hear from you.